Hello, and welcome to Weencast. Ween off the cuff. I am your Ween. Today, a very special episode. We try to recap 3 episodes of Riverdale in record time. Due to my demanding journeys, I haven't been able to post in 3 whole weeks. And wow, let me tell you, it all happened while I was gone. We start with Riverdale, Season 7, Episode 15, Ms. Teen Riverdale. This is a solid one-off episode that finally gives poor Ethel her due, her own episode. When the Miss Riverdale, Teen Riverdale pageant beauty girl who's the hottest girl in Riverdale competition is picked up to be broadcast nationally, Alice Cooper, Betty's insane mother, becomes obsessed with showcasing all the beautiful girls of Riverdale for the whole nation to impress everyone with how wonderful Riverdale is. So she gathers all of the girls of Riverdale, Betty, Veronica, Cheryl, Tony, Midge, probably somebody else that I've forgotten about, and has them all prepare to be beautiful pageant queens. At first, Betty objects, because pageants are about objectifying women. But in the end, her friends convince her to participate for some stupid-ass girl boss reason. But it's a good thing that Betty does, because she notices that there's one girl in Riverdale who hasn't been invited to be in the pageant, and that's Ethel. Instead, Alice is making Ethel be her assistant and do all kinds of administrative and manual labor on preparing the pageant, while refusing to indulge Ethel's dreams of being a pageant princess herself. But when Alice discovers that Midge is pregnant, and of course kicks her out of the pageant and exiles her to the Sisters of Quiet Mercy convent, which is a little weird. Why does Alice have the power to send somebody else's kid to a far-off prison? I don't know. I guess we can assume Alice just recommended the Sisters as a good place to hold Ethel prisoner. Or not Ethel, Midge, sorry. To hold Midge prisoner while she's pregnant. And of course, Midge's exile leaves Fangs bereft. Betty sees that there's an open slot in the pageant, and she and Veronica force Hal, Betty's father, to allow Ethel into the pageant, since they know Alice never will, due to her hatred of Ethel, for Ethel having parents that were murdered, and then also Ethel had to murder a man in self-defense. We haven't followed up on that in a while, but I'm worried about it. I'm worried about Ethel. Anyway, then there's a whole pageant. Oh, and then that's the other pageant contestant, I forgot. Evelyn, Ever is also there, and she's the main villain of the pageant, basically, besides Alice, because she's mean to everyone. She is homophobic. She is just crappy and horrible. But luckily, don't worry, it's Riverdale. She loses the pageant. Ethel proves a breakout star during the pageant because everybody else in town is watching the pageant on a tiny black and white TV at Pops. And let me tell you, I don't want to stereotype or gender essentialize the interests of young men, but I don't feel like there are a lot of teenage boys who would get so excited over the pageant dresses of their high school friends, but that's Riverdale for you. Is he, Dalian? Anyway, Ethel is the breakout star of the pageant. She sings a beautiful song, and she wears a beautiful yellow dress, and she has a whole fantasy about winning that involves Jughead being in love with her, and I would like us to get some follow-up on that as we enter the final episodes of the show, because Jughead is now in, at least flirty relationships, or is the recipient of a crush from Ethel, Tabitha, and then he and Veronica dated earlier in the season, and then later this season they get back together. So how are we going to resolve this? Jughead cannot be polyamorous. It's going to make the asexual Jughead fans so mad. But anyway, that's a problem for later. And it's Roberto's problem, not mine. Anyway, they get to the end of the pageant, and of course, Ethel is announced as the winner, and everyone goes crazy. Everyone is so proud of Ethel. They're like, gosh, she's what a star she is. As Clay says, oh, she's got main character energy. We should have made her the star of our musical. And Clay was right. But after the pageant, Alice reveals to Betty that Betty had won the judges' votes to be the pageant winner. But Alice, wanting to create chaos and get revenge on her husband, on Betty, it wasn't clear, decided to read out Ethel's name, and then everyone else was too scared to correct her because it was on live TV. Okay, sure, whatever. The point is, Ethel is the winner, and she deserved to be the winner, and Alice is crazy. The end. So that's episode 15, Miss Teen Riverdale. Season 7, episode 16, Stag, has a short title, but it's long on content. This episode is about sexo. In the least sexo plotline, Jughead and the editor-in-chief of Pep Comics confront this new burgeoning Comics Code Authority and try to convince the evil leaders of it, which is to say Principal Featherhead, Dr. Werther's, Sister Woodhouse, who runs the Sisters of Quiet Mercy, and Mayor Clifford Blossom, to ease up on some of their rules about no werewolves, no vampires, no hot stuff, no fun. And Jughead even consults Veronica for pointers on how to negotiate well. But in the end, he and the Pep Comics editor are completely obliterated in the negotiating sessions. The evil leaders of the Comics Code Authority have no interest in compromising whatsoever, and they institute new draconian rules that mean everyone has to capitulate to their demands to have completely sanitized comic books. Jughead is left in despair, but at the end of the episode, Veronica kisses him and they're in a relationship again, even though Veronica said she was going to be in a relationship with Betty, kind of, back in the musical episode. It doesn't matter. Veronica could be in a relationship with everyone or no one. Who knows what she's thinking? She just likes to mess people up. She's a hashtag girl boss. In yet another storyline, Tony and Cheryl decide to take pin-up photos of themselves, like boudoir photos, after being inspired by a lesbian pin-up magazine given to them by Tony's hot friend Lizzo. And the magazine is called Femme and In Magazine. And it's about lesbian pinups. Anyway, so they take their sexy photo shoot together in the chapel at Thornhill, and then Cheryl decides to paint one of the best photos into a beautiful, sexy oil painting. And then, of course, that's discovered by her mother, and her mother begins a new campaign of homophobic psychic warfare against her. And so Cheryl and Tony agree it's time to do something drastic, whatever that means. And then, in a third sexo storyline, Betty decides to accompany Veronica to a screening she set up at the Babylonium with Julian Blossom of a pornographic film called The Wedding Night, because all the guys are going to watch it, and so are Betty and Veronica. And see, that's what, maybe Veronica is in a relationship with Betty right now also, because why would you invite someone who wasn't your sexual partner to watch pornography with you, and also a bunch of other people? I feel uncomfortable when my father walks up behind me and I'm having like a romance conversation in Baldur's Gate 3 That's happened to me a lot in the last couple of days. Let alone inviting my friends to watch porn with me and a bunch of other people, including Julian Blossom, our high school bully. Anyway, the movie starts, and it turns out the female lead is Betty's sister Polly. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. And Betty, of course, is very upset, very distressed, makes them stop the movie, and she takes the film reel. She calls Polly, and Polly, seeing how upset Betty is, comes to Riverdale and explains that when she first moved to New York, she got kind of pushed into doing porn by a bad boyfriend, but she no longer does pornography, but she does still work in sexualized entertainment because she's a burlesque dancer named Polyamorous. And for some reason, Veronica, who reads burlesque trade magazines, if that's a thing, has heard of Polyamorous and is so #jelly. And Polly emphasizes how happy she is as a burlesque dancer, how much she enjoys her work, how she has a fiance who is a stockbroker named Langley Huggles. Langley Huggles. And how she's going to go on a trip to Europe soon. And Betty is like, wow, you're sexually liberated and you enjoy your life. God, I wish that were me. And Veronica says, oh, Polly, couldn't you do a performance at the Babylonium? Don't worry, I'll invite just the girls. What? What? Okay. So now Veronica is doing she's hosting a whole burlesque performance, but it's only for teen girls. And it's so confusing. I don't even know if it's homoerotic anymore. I don't know what Veronica's thinking, like, whether her motivations ever are, like, financial or artistic or prurient or what. Probably they're all of them. Maybe in that way, Veronica is the most complex television character ever written. Anyway, so then Polly does a big musical number that only has minor amounts of stripping in it. And Betty is so thrilled by this musical number that she actually starts to envision herself as Polly doing the musical number. And it's a little confusing because it does kind of read like Betty is aroused during her sister's burlesque performance. But none of us have control over our sexual experiences or our minds. Betty is a very troubled, repressed person. And so the key takeaway is that she found the performance empowering. She found the performance empowering, and she kind of wants to become a burlesque dancer or a stripper or a sex worker or something so she can fully experience herself and take control of her sexuality. But when she tells that to her evil mother goes on a rage fest and slaps Betty across the face, and they play a really phenomenal version of the Riverdale motif, since almost every song on the soundtrack is a version of the same musical motif, but this time it's like operatic. Do 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 do. Yeah, like that. It was high drama. But the most important storyline in this episode, Gay Archie real. Gay Archie real. Archie and Reggie have a threesome with a sex worker. Archie and Reggie have a threesome. Archie and Reggie go into Twyla Twist's room together, and then they sit down on the bed together. And how do they get here? Through a plot that basically could have come from porn. Because they go to Julian and Veronica's porn screening. They're disappointed when the porn doesn't play. They decide to rent a small projector and a porn movie from Julian. But the movie Julian gives them, he switches the reels. It's a wrestling movie, aka gay porn. Well, not really porn, because there's no explicit pornographic acts, that's the whole point, but it's extremely homoerotic. There's a lot of touching of butts. And Archie and Reggie are like, oh no, Julian gave us some kind of gay movie. We should turn it off. But we'll wait a second in case a girl comes on, and they watch the whole gay movie together. But the next day, they go and threaten Julian's life for playing some kind of homoerotic prank on them. And Julian's like, okay, I'll give you a real straight porn movie. It's a threesome with 2 women and 1 guy. But when they try to play that in the projector, the film melts right as they're about to get sexy. And the fellas freak out. They're clutching their boners. They're actively clutching their boners on screen. And so, desperately, as Archie says, no, Archie. No, it's Reggie who says it. He says, oh no, Archie. What are we gonna do? I'm horny as heck. Archie says, well, I got a plan. We're gonna go have a threesome. And where did Archie get this idea, you might ask? Where did Archie, the gentle feller, the most innocent man in the world, get the idea to have a threesome with Reggie? From Allen Ginsberg's Howl, obviously. Because in Writing Club, which he's in with Betty and Clay, and is led by Mrs. Grundy, of course, they read Howl. And Clay explained to him about heteronormativity, which made Archie say, heteronormativity? Just like, I don't even know if heteronormativity was a word that existed in the 1950s. Like, I'm not convinced that was a phrase that had been coined at that time, although I could easily be wrong. And Miss Grundy and Clay encouraged Archie to explore himself with both men and women both at once if he's interested. And also to stay up all night to see the sunrise, because that's beautiful. It's beautiful. And so he and Reggie do that at the same time. They explore each other's bodies with the help of Twilight Twist. And then they stay up to watch the sunrise on the school steps. They talk about how they've expanded their horizons and now everything seems possible. And then Archie says, you know, I love you, Reggie. Reggie says, I love you too, buddy. And that's Gay Archie real. Officially, Gay Archie is real. He's real. He's real. Roberto did it. Roberto did it. He said, Gay Archie must be real. And then he devoted his life to it, and now he's succeeded. He's doing this for revenge. So that's episode 16, Stag. Episode 17, the newest episode from last week, is called A Different Kind of Cat, and it stars Josie as Eartha Kitt. Basically, she even performs a dance number that basically goes, I'm a different kind of cat. But why is she actually here, you might ask? The real reason she's here is because she needs to premiere a movie musical that she has produced. And that movie musical is not getting any kind of wide Hollywood release. Okay, anyway, sorry. My cousin's dog came into the room and started slurping water really loudly. The point is, Veronica and Josie need to team up to premiere Josie's movie because no one else will touch it because it's a movie about a strong black female star. And Josie wouldn't let anyone recast it with a white star, so she can't have it premiered in any of the mainstream studios or theaters. So she needs Veronica to help her. And indeed, Veronica is eager because it's a girl boss mission. They put on a beautiful premiere. They even have Josie do like a sidewalk hand imprint as a star. They introduce Josie to Fangs, and Fangs performs Great Balls of Fire, and then he plays the bongos in Veronica's. No, in Josie's musical number, because Fang's a man of many talents, primarily the guitar and then also the bongos. And they have a big success and they impress the New York film critics. Hooray. Meanwhile, Archie, confused after last episode, decides what he needs is to spend more time having sex with MILFs. And so when he doesn't get Twyla Twist to get in a relationship with him because she's like, no, I have sex for money. You're a nice kid, but I don't need a 16-year-old boyfriend. I have sex for money professionally. Why don't you go look for another MILF? Archie decides it's a good idea to try and seduce Miss Grundy, which I guess the circle has come all the way around because now he's sexually harassing her instead of her sexually harassing him at the beginning of the show. And he writes a really weird, bad poem about her as Eve and also the snake in the Garden of Eden. And it's really embarrassing. She's horrified. And she tells him, no more love and sex poetry. You gotta write something beautiful and true, Archie. So then he writes a sad poem about his dad, and when Uncle Frank finds it, he freaks out because Archie was just supposed to use poetry to seduce girls, not talk about his feelings, his gay-coded feelings. And so Uncle Frank rips up Archie's poem and curses him, and Archie gets sad. Meanwhile, Betty decides that it's time for her to write her own book based on her zine, and the book is going to be called The Teenage Mystique, which sounds like a barely legal porn movie, but okay, all right, okay, fine. And so she starts writing her truth as a narrative. But she also needs a cover for the book. And so she decides she's going to reveal her identity as the author of The Teenage Mystique. And she gets Tony and Cheryl to take boudoir photos of her now that they're experts. And I guess it's not weird because it's not possible to tell at this point whether Cheryl and Betty are even still cousins. But it used to be that Blossoms and Cooper's having sexualized encounters was incest. But then again, old-timey Betty and old-timey Cheryl did have a very vivid, tempestuous relationship back in Riverdale. So who's to say? Anyway, she gets her boudoir photos done, and then Cheryl paints one of them into a sexy oil painting to be the cover of the book. Still not beating the allegations that the book is, like, teeny porn. But okay. Anyway. And in the course of this, she tells Cheryl, she's like, gosh, Cheryl, I'm writing all about sex and sexuality and my sexual feelings, but I feel like sometimes I'm the only person at Riverdale High who's not getting any. And Cheryl says, you know, Betty, a woman doesn't need a partner to enjoy her sexuality. And Betty's like, what do you mean, Cheryl? And so Cheryl provides her with an issue of Feminine magazine about self-pleasure. And so Betty's big breakthrough this episode is to learn to masturbate. And I'm happy for her. And the last plotline that I remember from this episode, because I think it's in the long term the most important plotline, Jughead decides, now that they're bound, oh god, now that Pep Comics is bound by the strictures of the Comics Code Authority, he's going to have to come up with some new comic book ideas. And so because of his new relationship with Veronica, he makes up a hot teen witch named Veronica, the Teenage Witch. And the editor-in-chief is like, no, she's too sexy. She's too sexy, Jughead. You're gonna have to tone it down. She's gotta have a cuter, more magical name. She needs to be blonde. She needs to wear more clothes. And she needs to be like only half a witch. Like, she can't be a whole witch. That's too satanic. And so, yes, you guessed it, team. Jughead invents Sabrina. And now you're wondering, wait a minute. Jughead invents Sabrina? Jughead has met Sabrina. Jughead had his body possessed by Sabrina's boyfriend, so Sabrina and the boyfriend could have sex because the boyfriend is in hell. Jughead got brought back to life by Sabrina. How does he invent Sabrina? What are you talking about? Your guess is as good as mine, Your Honor. Anywho, the Comics Code Authority still turns down Sabrina because it's too satanic to have a hot witch. So Jughead is left in the unenviable position of having to come up with some kind of comic book concept that's somehow even more wholesome than Sabrina. What could that possibly be? They leave us on a cliffhanger in this episode, but I think we all know. I think we all know what Jughead's about to invent. And that leads us into a whole host of questions and concerns. Is Jughead invent Riverdale? Question mark, question mark, question mark? Who, why, who make, no, what happened? Confused. Jughead invent Riverdale? But it all makes sense. In a way. In a way, it all makes sense. If Jughead invents Riverdale by inventing Archie, then Riverdale invented itself. The cycle is eternal, and that's what Riverdale's all about. Jughead is the writer. He's also the narrator. He's also one of the stars. He is a Trinitarian being. He's also God. Jughead. Wow. Anyway, so the next episode, which broadcasts next week on the 16th, is called For a Better Tomorrow. And based on the promo, it appears to be in black and white and possibly also about the atomic bomb dropping on Riverdale. But I think it's important we remember that could all be fucking fake. That could be like a 10-minute gag or an excerpt from a Jughead comic or something like that. And the rest of the episode could be completely normal. I mean, for Riverdale standards. And then the week after For a Better Tomorrow is an episode we don't know much about other than that it's called The Golden Age of Television, and I believe it's co-written by Tessa Lee Williams and Roberto himself. And it's called The Golden Age of Television. And, I mean, what more is there to say? What more is there to say? It's the penultimate episode of Riverdale ever. So, it's going to be profound. It's going to be profound. It's going to set everything up. And then, of course, on the 30th of this month, the final episode of Riverdale broadcasts. It's called Goodbye Riverdale. It's written by Roberto. They released some kind of summary of it, and I don't remember exactly how it goes, and this is the level of my shit-ass journalism, so I'm not going to look it up. I'm just going to blat it out when I remember. It seems to involve an 86-year-old Betty Cooper, now living in the future, which is now 67 years in the past, in the future, in the present. And she needs to return to Riverdale, her memories, and she seeks out a mysterious old friend. What does that mean? Who the fuck knows? Roberto knows. Roberto knows. And so, this is where I leave us. With those 3 episodes behind us, 3 more episodes ahead of us, and the eternal question, what is Roberto thinking? What is Roberto doing? What is Roberto's plan? Dude's basically a Cylon, because he's got a plan. Jughead, Jughead, Jughead. This has been Ween Off the Cuff. I am your Ween.